My name is Nicole Boere. My pronouns are she, her. I am currently living in Peterborough, Nogojimanong, and I am the Resource Centre Coordinator at KWIC. And so this past summer and fall, I helped to coordinate the 4-part event series that was the Youth as Agents of Change.
What were the initial intentions and expectations for the Youth as Agents of Change series, and how did the final outcome align with those initial plans?
That's a really good question, really big question. So I think that the initial intentions were to kind of design an event series that would be especially for youth and young people, but also available to the larger Peterborough and Trent and Peterborough community. So the idea was that we would have an event series that people could come to every single part of the event series and kind of like learn along and like discuss along with the event with the series, or they could just come to like a one-off and kind of appreciate it just as a one-time event as well. And so the other idea for the series was to, really incorporate youth and the power and the influence that youth and young people have in various movements and influence in community. And so we had to do this in like obviously a very new way while doing it online. So the intentions were to bring this to an online platform, which I think was new for so many people, but it went well. And so the topics included like kind of an introduction. And so we introduced the importance of having youth in various movements and having youth in engagement and leadership in activism. We discussed the climate crisis, past and present, and how like being in a digital world and especially in the pandemic, how things have changed. We discussed mindfulness and the practice and the importance of reflection in activism. And then we also talked about the importance of land-based and place-based learning. And then so over all of those 4 parts of the series, we met and partnered with 7 groups and organizations. We had 8 speakers and special guests, and we had over 130 participants. So it definitely was a really big success, and we're really happy with it.
What are some of the challenges, successes, and surprises that you encountered?
Yeah, I think definitely some of the challenges were, like learning how to use online platforms and like knowing what would work best. And so something that we had to do was kind of like continually adapt the series along the way based on feedback that we had. So, we used Zoom, and we had to like experiment with breakout rooms and the whiteboards and with all of these different things, and, making sure people had tech that was reliable and they could connect as much as possible. So there were moments that we had challenges that were like a speaker like wasn't able to connect in the ways that they had intended. So then they had to use their phone, and like maybe they cut out partway through. And then we had to do some like quick thinking and like putting people back on track so that we could like divert to discussion while the speaker was like reconnecting. And so we had some challenges that way with tech, and just like learning how to how to host an online event, especially with so many people. But it was lots of fun to make those pivots partway through, and I think it went well. But those were definitely some challenges, and like just a new world of being online and like not knowing how much time people like feel they can dedicate to online events. So I think that was definitely a challenging part. I think some surprises were how quickly an hour goes by. We really thought that, an hour at lunchtime would be like a really good time. People could like break up their day, and, we do an hour at lunchtime and then people would go on their way. But I don't know if it's just like in an online world or if maybe an hour goes by quickly everywhere, but we just found like an hour just went by so quickly. And so, we were really trying to have opportunities for people to say hello to one another in an online world. We like had introductions at the beginning of events, and so that took up a lot of time, and then we didn't have a lot of time always at the end for discussion. So I think something that was surprising is how quickly an hour goes by. So much of the feedback we got was people wanting the events to be longer, or just like wanting more time for discussion, which is really hard to squish into an hour because you want to just put so much content into these topics that we had. They're like really, really big topics. So it was hard to put as much as we could into an hour. So an hour went by really quickly. And successes, I think that generally this like the eagerness and the excitement from speakers to share their knowledge and their experiences they were all so gracious and so wonderful with their time. And with the ways that they shared and the openness they had and the ways that they facilitated discussion, that was really, really wonderful. And as well as the participants, just like really exciting. And like, I think they were excited to be there and happy to be there and happy to learn, despite the challenges that we had with, with like online tech and with timing of things. But people really just like happy to be there and happy to connect and happy to be there. So definitely it went all over, but it was overall a very big success and we were really happy with it.
How was your experience running a virtual event series for youth?
Yeah, so a virtual series for youth, planning it and organizing it and like helping to facilitate and all of those pieces was really, really exciting. Definitely a new experience for me. So in the past, some of the programming that I've done and the planning has been to in-person delivery. So just like very different in the ways that you are able to like read how people are feeling and how they're doing and how you kind of like alter along the way of what you're doing and kind of pivot in certain ways. And it's a lot harder to do that on Zoom. But I think that generally it was really exciting. And yeah, I think people were really gracious with their time and like so excited to be there in general. And we had some really exciting topics and some really, really exceptional speakers. So I think that that really like pulled all of it together and made it a good place to be. The virtual world is, I think, a new one for everyone. And so it was a lot of learning.
What was it like hosting an event series during a pandemic?
So obviously the pandemic definitely changed so many of the ways that people are able to come together. And so I think, like I said earlier, one thing that we really wanted to provide the opportunity for was for people to say hello to one another, at least at the beginning of events, to, say like, this is my name, this is where I'm from, these are my pronouns, to like kind of feel like we're like in this event together to kind of mimic how things would maybe go in a real in-person event. And so we tried to incorporate things like that so that people felt like they were, not in a computer. They were hopefully like connecting with people on some level by recognizing people or saying hello. And there was lots of people that came to multiple parts of the series. So hopefully they were able to, think like, oh, like maybe I don't know anyone personally here, but I've like said hello to that person, or like I recognize that person from another series or another event. And so that was really important.
How did the pandemic shape the event discussions and topics?
Yeah, so I think the pandemic like also helped to shape the topics that we talked about. So we tried to focus on things that had happened throughout the year and in different ways. So we talked a lot about justice and climate and how like different people's experiences come to light in different ways. And so I think that we tried to have topics and speakers as well that had different backgrounds and different knowledge and, related to each other and to their communities in different ways, which is really, I think, really beneficial. So obviously it was really challenging, I think, in a lot of ways to have topics that things moved really, really quickly in 2020. And so I think it was hard it wasn't always possible to have the reflexiveness of like having topics that like directly responded to certain issues that happened throughout the year. But I think we tried to have events that tried to like find a point where things connected and to try to, make connections between different issues that weren't just about 2020, but also incorporated the things that were happening throughout 2020 as well.
What are your final takeaways that you'd like to share with the KWIC community?
Yeah, I think firstly, thank you so much to the people that we partnered with for the event, the speakers that were so gracious and so generous with their time and their sharing, and to the participants that came out. It was really wonderful to have you, and thank you so much for being there. We hope that you learned something, that you were able to take something away, that maybe you made a connection, that maybe you have a new insight, whatever it may be. We were really happy to have you there. My big takeaways from the series, ironically, are maybe in 4 parts because there was 4 events that we did for the fall. But I think each of them had like a really big takeaway. In our first event, we talked about the importance of youth in activism, and Ethel Nalule, who is a activist and an artist, talked a lot about the ways that, you know, activism can feel like this really big, scary thing of showing up in really, really big ways. And it can feel like a lot of pressure for some people. And sometimes, and especially in a pandemic, like knowing the right ways to show up. And, you know, I think Ethel emphasized a lot of really great points that it's not, activism doesn't have to be these big things. It can be the way that you express yourself and the ways that you relate to people. So it can be, you know, in a pandemic, picking up something for your neighbor, or, you know, sending a text to a friend and just like checking in with people. Like just showing support is also like community connection, and having networks of people and sharing is also just as much activism as it can be to show up at a rally. And so it's not always possible to do all of the things all of the time, but finding ways to like really authentically engage and to build community and to connect with people is really important. The second one was, I think inclusion and amplification are essential in positive change. And this we talked a lot about with Morgan Carl and Malaika, Collette, and Shaelyn Wabegijig in our second event. And so in the face of so many social and environmental issues, we really have to make these connections between all of these issues and, you know, recognize that, yeah, missing and murdered Indigenous women does connect to environmentalism, does connect to patriarchy, does it connect to oil, sands, and pipelines. Like these are all things that, you know, come together, and the ways that we show up for different movements and the ways that we show solidarity is so, so important. So when we're making change in one area, we also have to remember that, you know, these things are connected to other issues, and the ways that we move forward is so, so essential, and including and amplifying the people who are most impacted, and really bringing their experiences and their voices, and like letting those people make change in the ways that they want to, and supporting as allies as well. The third one, I think, was on mindfulness and having a reflective practice. So in activism, we talked a lot about how it's important to have time to, you know, work on yourself as well. And to be able to authentically and wholly show up requires rest and really relaxation at some point. So for the longevity of movements and for yourself, it's really important to have a practice and that incorporates reflection and mindfulness to some extent. And lastly, we talked about the importance of place. So when we have these discussions that are on these really big topics that are global issues, it can feel really, really overwhelming. But breaking it down into place, like there are local answers and nuance that is not recognized on a global scale. So bringing issues down to a local scale and reflecting on them and like looking for answers and, you know, seeking knowledge and experience and really like connecting ourselves to place is really grounding. And that's maybe where people find connection and find solidarity and find the ability to like lend support in new ways and to show up in new ways. So grounding our knowledge in in place, and, you know, finding connections in the places we are and learning from the land are all really, really important for global issues. So that's a lot of information, I think, but those were some of the big takeaways that I think were emphasized in our event series. So yeah, young people are really important in movements, in global movements, in local movements. And they play an integral role in the way that we are able to make change. And I think that the series really worked to remind people of the power that they have collectively and individually, even in these really, really difficult and trying times. And there are so many things that are like worn out sayings that I'm sure some of us maybe never want to hear again. Like, yeah, just the pandemic and unprecedented times. But yeah, I think that collectively we have a lot of power to make a lot of change, even when things are changing really quickly. And so it's important to show up. So thank you so much to the people that showed up, and to the KWIC community, and to, yeah, everyone that came to events. And yeah, so as we move into a new year, I hope that my big takeaways and my big thank yous, I guess, are to everyone that came, that supported, that was there. Yeah, so into 2021, I hope that people are able to take care of themselves, look out for their neighbors, and to continue to do what they have to do to, you know, have community and find ways to support one another. And so we hope to see you soon.